All right, welcome to a special episode of the Woe Show, made in conjunction with Insights Training Center. Today we've got Greg Hamilton, the founder of Insights Training Center, and we're going to talk about his experience, his background, and why are we talking to a trainer? It's because I'm interested in guns and gun stuff myself, and I've known Greg for a long time. Uh, when I first met Greg, I thought he was a local trainer and a bit of a local celebrity, but it turns out he's a national celebrity. A lot of famous names in the tactical space have worked with him over the years, and the internet age. If it's not on social media, it doesn't exist for millennials and Gen Z and younger.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted to pull Greg kicking and screaming into the social media age. It's interesting talking to someone who's been around the block, because as a millennial myself, I'm 42, doesn't look like it, but I've transitioned from the analog to the digital age. And in the gun space, we kind of see that transition from the dark ages of before the 80s to the era of everyone on the internet knows how to do a speed reload. Everyone knows basic small unit tactics. Greg was basically there for that transition. Uh, yeah, let's start off with you, Greg. Where were you born? How old are you? Where's your childhood like? Stuff like that.
Sure. Born right here in Seattle, Washington, believe it or not, actual native. So grew up in West Seattle and then Kirkland mostly. Yeah.
And then at some point you joined the military. How old were you?
I went in when I was 19. I was in high school, and I remember it was like the first day of senior year, and we're all sitting out in the sun, and all these guys are talking about what colleges they were going to go to and what programs they were going to go to, right? So they're thinking a year ahead of time, right? It's first day of senior year, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have a plan. Like all these guys have plans, I don't have a plan. And so I started thinking about it and realized that I always was interested in being in the military and was interested in things that you really can't do anymore, like exploring the world. The world's been explored, right? But the closest you're going to get to that is probably like special operations military. So that kind of challenge and that kind of newness. And so I went and enlisted with the delayed entry program because I knew I wanted to be in special forces. And they had that program back then, just like they have now, where you could enlist off the streets. So I went and got a contract, but that required me wait for quite a long time. So I was 19 when I actually went in. And that's great too, because like I knew I wanted to be in special forces. I go to MEP station, right, to like ship off the day I'm going to ship out. And they're like, oh, your contract isn't valid anymore.
Oh man!
Right. So I'd waited all this time. Like
You're gonna scrub toilets now.
yeah. Well, no, they're like, your contract's not valid. You don't have to go in.
Oh.
And I go, well, what does this mean? And they go, well, you can go home. And I'm like, well, I just quit school, right? I just quit my job. I just packed my things and came down here. I'm not going home. I'm leaving today. What can we do? And a friend of mine had wanted to go to Ranger Battalion. And I was like, no, I want to be a Green Beret. I wanted to be one since I was like 10.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, well, okay, I'll be a Ranger. That's like the next best thing, supposedly. In my mind, my 19-year-old mind, this is pre-internet, right? You only get information from books and meeting people.
VHS tapes.
Yeah, at best. And so I said, well, I want to be a Ranger. And so they get on the computer. The computers back then were pretty pathetic. And they look it up and they go, well, we can give you this unassigned airborne slot and you can volunteer to be a Ranger. And I was dumb enough to think.
You believed them.
I believed them. I was dumb enough to believe them. And so I shipped out with an unassigned airborne contract. And then when I did get to airborne school, they did in fact have a Ranger recruiter. He came up and did his little talk one of the first days when you're in airborne school. And I had a couple buddies going to battalion because the group of us in our basic training infantry OSAT company that were going to go airborne were all together in the same platoon in infantry school, right? We had known each other from day one. And so we're all there. And some of those guys have Ranger contracts. And so I go volunteer. And of course, I didn't know anything. And it turns out that guy that was the Ranger recruiter, he was a Vietnam Ranger vet that basically somebody was taking care of by giving him this job because he was definitely an alcoholic that probably shouldn't be in the military anymore. But they gave him the Ranger recruitment job at airborne school. And so it gets to the end of airborne school, and I still have orders that's sending me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I don't get my Ranger orders. And I call this guy, call him. And he finally answers the phone. I go, I don't have my orders for Ranger Battalion. And he goes, well, just wait. Just wait. I'm getting them. I'm working on them. Just stay.
Oh, no.
Well, you can't just stay. You have to go where you're told, right? So we go to sign out, and I'm like, that's it. I have to do something to go to Ranger Battalion. So we all go to these bleachers, and you go to sign out at airborne school. And I just sat there and didn't go sign out, because this guy told me to wait. So I figure I have an excuse. You know, you can get away with a lot in the Army if you play dumb sometimes. So everybody comes out, and we all go back to the barracks. Everybody packs their bags. Everybody leaves. And I just stay in the airborne barracks. And some sergeant's walking through to like close out the barracks, and he sees me. And he's like, the hell are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I didn't out-process, Sergeant. And of course, he's just like, you know, hair's on fire. He's so mad because he wants to go be off for the weekend, right? And, you know, so he has to deal with this. So he's like, he drags me over to the reception center on post, and they won't take me because I don't have orders. And so he begs them, and finally they take me. And they're like, you know, wagging their finger at me for being bad. And then they go, okay, Monday, you have to go sign out, and you have to go where your orders say to go. So I got lucky. I went back Monday to airborne school to the, you know, admin people, and I go to sign out. And my name is Gregory Michael Hamilton. And there was some guy that I need to look up someday and thank that was named Michael Gregory Hamilton from like the New Jersey National Guard. And he signed out and took all of my records.
Oh, my God.
So all my enlistment records, everything, it's all, you know, they didn't really have computers. So it was all on paper, right? So he had taken all my records. They're like, well, you're going to have to stay here, and we're going to have to rebuild your file, right? So every day I was supposed to go back to this place, and they were going to rebuild my file and rebuild my contract. And I would just kind of not go, and I'd go to the library, and I just did things and wasted time for 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Until the Ranger guy got me.
It's like Home Alone, but for the Army.
Yeah.
You know?
I just walked around post. I'd go to the library, right? And I was just milking it, just trying as hard as I can. And finally, the Ranger Regiment guy, like, had my orders.
Oh, great.
And then I go to 3rd Ranger Battalion and ended up hooking up with all my buddies. So we ended up...
phrasing.
What's that? My bunkmate from like reception station on, he ended up getting in headquarters company. And so he made sure, you know, we were talking daily, and he made sure that I got put in the same platoon as all the rest of the guys, all the guys we all knew. Right. So that's how I got to 3rd Ranger Battalion. Yeah.
How many years were you in Ranger Battalion?
2 years at 3rd Bat, and then 2 years at Regimental Recon. So, yeah, it was the founding of 3rd Ranger Battalion, so it wasn't even activated yet. So we got there, I got there about 3 months before activation. And it was an incredibly awesome time.
What's the term for that? A plank holder?
Yeah, that's a SEAL term. But, you know, I guess the Army uses it now for founding a unit. So, yes, I am a plank holder, 3rd Ranger Battalion. And was there for the activation ceremony.
What year was that?
1984.
Oh, man. That was when I was born.
Yeah. So 1984, October 3rd, 1984 was activation day. And there were guys that were there up to like 6 months before activation, some of the old timers that were friends of mine. And then my group of guys, we came in about 3 months before activation. And it was just incredido training because the battalion wasn't stood up yet. And so all the privates were off just doing everything. We went to every infantry range again. We'd go down to Building 4, which is the infantry school where like they teach IOBC and the basic and advanced officer course for infantry. Mm-hmm. We went to actual Ranger school, even though not as Ranger students, but they made drug deals. And so we went to Mountain Ranger Camp. We went to Florida Ranger Camp as a battalion, as just privates with an E5 in charge of the companies, because all the senior guys were off building the SOPs for the battalion. Yeah. They would take like, you know, these 150 privates, and there'd be a Sergeant E5 in charge of the whole thing, and off we'd go places and do things. Wow. And we did that for months.
I got really lucky then. Man, really serendipitous turn of events for your career.
Yeah, the foundational training was incredible. The guys that came from that first block, we learned so much because everybody was learning to be an NCO from day one. And then I knew that I wanted to be, when I heard about Regimental Recon, I knew I absolutely wanted to do that. And, you know, all my experience reading was all the LRP, you know, Green Beret stuff from Vietnam, right? You know, now I'm in a Ranger regiment, and, you know, I got 600 guys in a battalion, and it's not quite the thing that I had read about, right? I wanted that small team thing. And I heard about these guys, and we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at Camp McCall back when it was old wood buildings. And somebody goes, that guy's in Regimental Recon. We're all sitting against the building, like eating, MREs, and they go, that guy's from Regimental Recon. And I just said, hell with it. And I just got up and walked over and said, Sergeant, can I sit down and talk to you? And he's like, sure. Turned out that I picked the best guy possible to talk to, a guy named Keith Benedict. And he had been Force Recon Marine and had got out, went to college, got a degree. And while he was getting his degree, went through the Special Forces Q course. They used to have this thing called paper tabs where you do correspondence and then you go for a few weeks for the phase back and forth, and you eventually get Special Forces qualified.
That's crazy.
He had gone to that, and then he knew he wanted to be in Regimental Recon. Somehow I'd heard about this unit because it just stood up. I don't even know how he heard about it. And he had come in the Army as like an E4, even though he had been E7 in the Marines. And so I just got lucky. I sat down and talked with the one guy that would have talked to me like a human being, even though I'm a private, not in Regimental Recon. And he's like, I go, how do I get in Regimental Recon? And he's like, do this, do that, do this, volunteer for everything, get every skill you can, blah, blah, blah. And so I did. And when I graduated Ranger School, I took almost 2 years to go to Ranger School because we had this giant backlog. We have 600 privates all starting at the same time. It's not a normal situation where
there's
you
a
wait
trickle from different units,
right? Normally when you go to Ranger battalion, it might take 3 to 6 months to go to Ranger School. It took me almost 2 years. One is I broke my ankle in Panama, so that I got bumped and I had to rehab myself. But when I graduated Ranger School, a buddy of mine who had been free falling with the Regimental Recon guys. So back in the day, if you were a civilian skydiver, you could challenge the free fall course, and you could submit your information and they would send you to just the last half of free fall school. You didn't have to have a slot to go to free fall school. They would just special thing that the unit didn't have to pay for. So my buddy had been jumping with Regimental Recon. So we graduated Ranger School together, and the Ranger Battalion usually just gives you like basically an 11-day break. Like you graduate Ranger School, they don't expect you to show up Monday. They expect you to show up the next Monday. You're just off. And so we literally got in our uniforms and went down to Regimental Recon, walked in and said, we want to volunteer for Regimental Recon. And they didn't even know what to do with us. Most of the guys were gone. They were in Central America doing something. And this guy literally gets out like an application form, like for a job, and he's like, fill these out. And we fill them out, and we just kept coming back. And they just acted kind of like we were supposed to be there. And they're like, they interview us, the OIC, the NCOIC. Then they bring in the team sergeants to interview us. And then basically the team sergeants picked us, said, I'll take that guy. I'll take that guy. And they just said, go get your gear and come on over. You're going to go to the field with us for like 2 weeks. And so we just went back to battalion. We didn't no permission from anybody to do any of this, right? We just go back to battalion, grab all our gear, and we're walking out. I remember me and my buddy were walking out with all our gear. And my platoon sergeant, he had not seen us since we left for Ranger School, right? Because we're still on our break. Yeah. And he sees us. He's like, what are you guys doing? And we just started running. We just ran. We're going to Regimental Recon. And we just ran away. And we went to the field with him for 2 weeks, to get evaluated by your team. And that was it back then. There was no real official selection.
Yeah, I guess this was before the HRification of the Army.
Yeah, and then Regimental Recon became a really big deal, right? So they have this whole now pipeline operator, they have their own operator training course thing, and that they have a formal selection. And ours was, you had to have the right background, you had to have all the right skills, not just a normal Joe. I was a lead assault climber at 3rd Air Battalion, right? I was already scout swimmer, did the desert survival instructor stuff. I'd already done a bunch of extra stuff. Even though I was newly Ranger qualified, I had all this other stuff I'd been doing because I'd been there 2 years, and I'd been volunteering for everything. And so we went to Regimental Recon, spent 2 years there, and I left active duty from there. And knowing that I might come back, but I wanted to experience civilian life as an adult, I never quite became a full civilian because immediately I went to work at Mid-South Institute of Self-Defense Shooting. That's where I went. Right.
Yeah. Mid-South. Yeah.
I drove right there. So that's
right out of the Army.
Yes. 2 of my friends, Jeff Helm and John Hannon, the guy that got me, I told you was in headquarters company that got me platooned with all my buddies. He ended up becoming the JSOC commander's bodyguard driver, and met John Shaw, and was kind of John Shaw's gopher at Fort Bragg when he was teaching there for a couple of years, when he was first setting up the shooting program at Delta Force.
Oh, I see.
Right. So right after Grenada, that unit decided to hire John Shaw to
Because
modernize
they
their
had
shooting.
learned the hard way. Let's have a pause real
Yeah,
quick
yeah,
and fill
absolutely.
people in on John Shaw and the Mid-South Institute of Shooting.
Sure.
So I just learned about this recently myself. John Shaw, Rob Latham, Brian Enos, who else? Jerry Barnhart. Okay,
Yep.
these are guys in the 80s who basically cracked the code on how to shoot guns fast, accurate, good.
Yep.
Everything we do today is based on what they figured out in the 80s.
Absolutely.
Everything that's being taught now is based on it's just refinement of what they figured out. Unfortunately, like even as recently as 10 years ago, there was still debate on what style of shooting, like what technique works best, which was stupid. Because people were still debating Weaver versus just modern style.
Yeah.
And basically John Shaw, all the previous names I just mentioned, they were the ones who figured out via competition shooting how to be super fast and accurate. And I didn't know about the Delta Force connection. I didn't know about the Special National Missions Unit connection.
Yeah. So what happened is my understanding, I was not in that unit or, there when this happened, but my understanding is they came back from Grenada and decided that the Vietnam style of shooting was not cutting it, right? And John Shaw was the reigning USPSA champion at the time. Jerry Barnhart, Rob Latham, those guys were just about to come onto the scene. He was the first, and he was pretty much the first to do an isosceles, what we call an the modern isosceles. Back then, everybody was Weaver shooters, right? Weaver, modified Weaver, the Chapman, yeah. And some of the guys, they were excellent. Ray Chapman, Ross Seyfried, these guys were incredible. And everybody modeled them and was chasing this thing, right? And Shaw got into it. He's very competitive. He's a big guy, right? He's a big hands. Look at like Rob Latham and Brian Enos, John Shaw. They're all really big guys. Which is a huge advantage, right? There's no doubt. Though you have shooters like Jerry Barnhart, smaller guys, really great, right? But Shaw was big, and he was competitive. He was naturally pretty good. And what happened is you really couldn't make any money yet as a shooter. There was no money to be
purely
made,
for the love of the game,
basically. And everyone's trying to figure out, like, how do I make enough money to buy more ammo, to shoot more, to compete more? But what happened is there was a guy named Rich Davis from Second Chance Body Armor Company. I know this is a long segue, but it's really fun. So do you know anything about Rich Davis and Second Chance Body Armor Company? So I don't know if he's still alive, and he probably would agree. He's kind of a nut. So
all the best inventors are.
Yeah, he's kind of a nut, and he's poor. Him and his wife are delivering pizzas in Flint, Michigan.
Oh man. Flint, wow. Yeah,
like late 70s, right? Him and his wife, they have guns. They have a 12-gauge shotgun pistol that they actually carry in a pizza box with their hand on it, and they have a 22 revolver. And back then, you could buy 500 rounds of 22 for $10, right? And so he would buy 500 rounds of 22 ammo once a month and go shoot the whole thing. That was his practice. And he got in a gunfight. And he didn't have the shotgun because they were both working shifts, and his wife had the shotgun.
Oh, I see.
But Rich Davis pulled out his 22 revolver and made 5 out of 6 hits on 3 guys, and lived. But afterwards, he was like, I can't believe cops do this, and I can't believe that they get shot at and they don't have anything to stop bullets. And so he wanted to pioneer the truly wearable body armor, right? Now, back then, everybody said that even if you could stop the bullet, you'd still die.
Yeah, the shock would kill you.
Blunt force trauma, right?
Yeah.
And he figured, I've got to be able to prove that this works. And so he literally, you can find videos of it. He goes out in the woods somewhere around Flint, Michigan, and he knows that he wants to get shot, and then he's going to shoot some targets to prove he can fight back. But he wants visual targets. And so he basically drove by an abandoned bowling alley and stole a bunch of bowling pins.
Oh my God.
And he sets them up on a sawhorse, and the camera, is the big cameras all set up on the tripod, and he literally shoots himself in the chest with a 44 Magnum and then shoots these bowling pins. Jeez. And then he takes this video and he sent it to police departments all over the country to prove that this worked, and that launched his business. Then
He believed in his product, man.
Yes,
Was he the
absolutely.
first to shoot bowling pins, or had that been around?
Yes, no, this is where it comes from. And
Oh
this
my
leads to
God.
John Shaw figuring out the isosceles stance, actually. This is where it all comes from. So what happened is Rich Davis does this. He sends this video. He starts making money. Then there's a police magazine that's published monthly, and he buys a full color ad, inside the cover ad in one of those magazines. And what he had done is this is the Dirty Harry era, right? 44 Magnums. Rich Davis contracted with Smith & Wesson to get 400 of these pistols.
Jesus.
So he bought 400 of these 44 Magnums. And then he takes out this full page ad in the law enforcement magazine that basically says, if you're wearing one of our vests and you get shot by a bad guy and you kill the bad guy, we'll give you a free Dirty Harry special.
That's so not PC. Oh my God, he gets so sued.
This is a legitimate ad that he took out. Well, the problem is the attorney generals of all the states call him immediately and tell him that that's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? So now he's stuck with 400 pistols.
Oh, man.
And this is where the second chance bowling pin shoot comes to exist. So it's a competition where we know now how they set up the bowling pins on the table and you knock them off the table. He just made that up. And the deal was you could win guns. He was giving away all these Dirty Harry specials, plus other guns. So guys like John Shaw, gas is like 79 cents a gallon or whatever. They drive from Memphis, Tennessee, all the way to Flint, Michigan to shoot this thing and win like 10 guns.
Nice.
And you can sell those guns and buy ammo, right?
Yeah,
and so Shaw's up there. Well, if you've never shot pins, you have to be way more accurate than what the average IPSC guy was back then, right? You got to hit him dead on. Because you got to punch them off the table. You don't want them to spin and be a mess. And so guys they're experimenting with everything. And one of the first things they experimented with was long slide 1911s. And that just doesn't work at all, right? The slide, they wanted more sight radius so they could be more accurate. That was the thought.
Plus more mass.
Oh yeah, the mass moving is just, the gun moves all over the place. It's a mess. Well, a guy named Clark, a famous gunsmith, I think Ed Clark is his name, he came with the idea, what if we just kept the normal slide mass, took that extra piece of slide, like to cut it off, and we like mounted that on the front of the barrel.
So crude muzzle brake type?
There was no muzzle brake yet. It was just the end of the slide with the sight. But the deal is, now you have weight on the barrel and you have a non-reciprocating front sight.
So it's like, I think they call it island now.
Well, they called it a Clark pin gun. The idea was we could put weight out front and it wasn't so much about the weight. It was about the long sight radius. And it was about the non-reciprocating front sight. So now the sight's sitting still. And it turned out the weight out there, having weight on your barrel and having a lighter slide keeps the gun locked just a little bit longer, and which reduces muzzle flip. It's a little bit more time for the recoil energy to get into the frame of the gun, right? So what happens is Shaw's got one of these and he starts to notice more things about his technique than he had ever seen before. A lot of it's probably because of the non-reciprocating front sight. And he starts going from the classic this to more of this, right? Then somebody figures out, well, why don't we put some slots in the top of this thing out there and vent gas out the top? The first compensators, which really were not very good compensators at all back then, but they were better than nothing. Over time, over a few years of going to this competition, because it was the competition you could win the most money at, Shaw figures out all the way out to here was the way to shoot faster. He was able to see more errors and more detail in his front sight because his front sight wasn't moving as much. And that led to the modern isosceles. And that was about the same time he won the national championship. And then Delta came back from Grenada and said, we need to learn to shoot the modern way. They hired him. And according to him, he spent, I think he said 38 weeks the first year and 50 weeks the next year at their compound designing the modern shooting program. So if you go now and you do a program that works from here and then works from here and then separates the hands and then goes to the holster, if you see 6 dots, 6 8-inch dots, or what are called the DEA dots, the 3-inch dots, that's all from John Shaw.
Oh, that's interesting. So this is like what is it? Ancient version of the Roland special, right? Because the red dot shows you your weaknesses. So stabilized or separated front sight on an island on the barrel. It kind of does a similar thing.
Yes, it did. It allowed him to. Now, at that time in 1988, when I got there, it was totally recognizable as how we shoot now, except for a couple little things. He was still shooting thumbs down. right? Instead of thumbs
So
up.
revolver grip.
Yeah, that old revolver grip. The guys were still doing that. And Shaw told me when Delta hired him that he was a good shooter, but he had no idea how to teach.
Oh, I see.
And he had no idea what he was doing.
That's a common problem.
He was just doing it, right? He's a champion. He's good, but he doesn't know how he's good, right? So these guys basically paid for him to figure out how he was good and how to explain he was good. Now, he also had the right students, because literally Shaw's main way of teaching was he would go up and he'd demo something. This is the classic John Shaw. Y'all watch me. And then he goes, y'all do that.
Oh my God.
Now, when you have all A-type personalities that all could probably be junior college lettered athletes in maybe multiple sports, you got these guys from Delta Force, they're coordinated athletic dudes. They're super hyper competitive, right? If you show them something and then say, okay, figure that out, and then not only figure it out, but figure it out, and then we're going to do a competition in 30 minutes on that exact drill, you really don't have to teach them details. Yeah. They'll figure out the details. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because they're tactile people. They have knowledge of what their body's doing, right? And so
they've already been selected for their ability. Yes,
they already know how to learn. They have the drive, right? And so you show them things, and then they go experiment, and they go, okay, this is working, and then they compete. And of course, they all want to win, and they're watching each other. And of course, the guys that do the best, those are the guys that you model more. You ask them, how did you do that? What did you do different, right?
Yeah, interesting.
And then the art grows, right?
So that was one thing that when I first talked to you, 10 years ago about this, that's super interesting, because I got in because of Magpul Dynamics and entertainment, as they call back in the day.
Yeah.
But it was back then it was like, oh man, you need to learn these secret, awesome military techniques, and then learning that the military actually learned this from regular old civilian Joes in the 80s.
Yeah,
it went full circle.
Yep.
So civilians taught it to high-speed military guys, but the high-speed military guys teach it to civilians.
Right.
It's a full circle. It's
So then after Shaw, that same unit continued to work with people like you talked about, Jerry Barnhart, Rob Latham, Brian Enos, and they continued to advance the art. But like you said, it was almost all figured out in the 80s. And definitely by mid-90s, I'd say about 96-ish, it was probably about the first year of IDPA, second year of IDPA, definitely like the second year of the limited nationals. I'd say everything was figured out by then, how to shoot. The only thing that's changed is how we deliver the information and how quickly we can get someone up to world-class standards, right? Like back in the day, Ross Seyfried in 1977 ran a 3.5 second El Presidente.
On YouTube, people would say,
yeah, but he did it, but it took him 1,000 runs. And so nowadays, how many people can do that? There's 20 or more, I bet. And they can do it every time, and they can do it cold. And so that's what's really changed is Brian Enos identified this idea of limit of human ability probably 30 years ago. And he started looking at all the standardized USPSA IPSC drills around the world that have been shot for 20, 30, 40 years and realized that at some point in the past, someone had shot it as fast as it could be shot. And all we were doing now is getting closer and closer to that perfect number more often. Does that make sense? Nobody was getting better. Somebody had already done it as fast as it could be done. Now we have 100 people that can do it all the time instead of one guy doing it as a one-off, right? So that's what's really changed in the last 20 years is the ability to transfer the knowledge.
It's kind of like the 4-minute mile was thought to be an impossibility, but then once one guy did it,
then yes,
1,000 other people was like, if it's doable, I can do it.
Then it just becomes the standard, right? Yeah, absolutely, it becomes the standard and more. And then the training technology to get people to that 4-minute mile, like how did that guy train? How do I need to train? I need to model the best trainer, right, and learn how they got there. And that's what's going on now. And now you have guys. We'll look at a local legend, Travis Tomasi. He
explained his career real quick for the people who are not.
Okay.
Yeah, because millennials will remember him. But...
This is mostly hearing this from his father. So, I don't know him personally, but his father, Squire Tomasi, is a local masterclass shooter. He's probably 15 years older than I am, maybe 20 years older than me. He owned a custom Porsche shop, the kind of like a racing Porsche shop, the kind of shop where all the mechanics are perfectly clean. because they steam clean the cars before they even touch them, right? They're like meticulous dudes, right? And they all shoot together. So they're all three gunning all the time. So he's a car racer, motorcycle racer, master class shooter, three gunner, and he's doing it all the time.
And his son.
But his kids don't do any of it.
What?
Yeah, his kids didn't want to do any of it. So here he is, like all these cool masculine things, and none of his kids want to do it all. And it was, according to Squire, what happened is Travis came up to him at like 17 and said, "Dad, I want to learn to shoot." And he's like,
"Hallelujah.
Thank the gods."
Let's
right?
go.
But this is the kind of guy Squire is he basically, this is once again coming from Squire. I wasn't there. He basically hands him the same gun last year's world champion used. Mm-hmm. The holster that the world champion used, all the gear, all the ammo. He calls up 5 local grandmasters and says, "Teach my son how to shoot." Mm. And 11 months later, he shot into the top 16 shoot-off at the national championships. Mm. So this is the proof that we know how to make great shooters, right? The tech, we've known how to do it for 20 years. There's, like you said, there's the arguments about technique, and they still go on, and it's just ridiculous because among the people that know what they're doing, there is no argument, right? They all are excellent, and we can transfer the knowledge to anybody that has the drive to do it. So going way back,
let's go back to John Shaw.
Yeah, back to John Shaw. So it turns out my buddy John Hannon was John Shaw's gopher at Fort Bragg while he was teaching there, and he got, my buddy got to go to these shooting schools, got to go to these driving schools. I was so jealous. I was immensely jealous that he got to do these things and wanted to do them so badly. Another friend of ours, Jeff Helm, was up at Fort Bragg, and it turns out Jeff was getting out about 3 months before me, and I didn't know, but Shaw had asked Hannon, "Do you know a couple young Rangers that would like to work here at Mid-South?" And he gave him my friend Jeff Helm's name, and when I found out that Jeff got hired, I was extra jealous, right? Happy for him, but definitely jealous.
Yeah, so happy for you.
Yeah, but I'm like, I call them both of them constantly, and I'm like, this is back, we have to call on phones and pay huge amounts of money for long distance, and I'm like, dudes, I have to go to that shooting school. I have to. You got to get me a slot in the course, right? And then, like, basically about the day I got out of the service, I get a call, and it's like, "Hey, man, just come right now. You're going to take the class with the group that's coming next week, and then we're going to decide whether you want to work here or not." And so that's what I did. I drove out, didn't pay for the class, shot the class, and immediately started working as a coach, right? And so you don't know anything. I mean, I don't know anything at this point. I have used like Chuck Taylor's books and watched Jeff Cooper's videos and been coached by guys that had been to SOT and had been to Gunsight and places like that, but I knew nothing about modern shooting. But I'm a young Ranger, 24 years old, 23 years old at this time. And, I'm coordinated and driven and passionate. And so I learned. And so that was my next, 6 months is living there at Mid-South and teaching with John Shaw every single day.
Yeah. Interesting.
But so I was there in 88. I came home. I started going to college, started shooting competitively. I was in 12th Special Forces Group. That was a reserve Special Forces Group out of North Fort.
They don't even exist anymore.
No, 11th and 12th went away. Somebody during Desert Storm in 1990 figured out, I think that nobody in the Army even knew they existed. Nobody important. You know what I mean? People that decide things didn't even know they exist.
Oh, yeah. I mean, bring it back for the Zoomers. Before the global war on terror, like a Special Forces career was considered a dead-end career. Like Special Forces was considered the redheaded stepchild of the Army. Like if you were like an officer there, it's like, oh, his career's done. Like,
well, yeah, you're not going to the top. That definitely. It's a limited pyramid. And so, yeah, 11th and 12th group existed. There were reserve groups. During Desert Storm, there was a consolidation where they decided that all combat arms needed to be in the National Guard, and then the various support units would be in the reserves. And so 11th and 12th went away, 19th and 20th stayed and grew.
And then how long were you in Special Forces? Like how many years?
Well, I did, I was at 12th group for maybe 3 years, 4 years. And I got an injury and wasn't really liking the group very much. Back then you had some, when I first joined, you had some really experienced old time Vietnam guys. And then you had some guys that weren't experienced. That paper tab thing I talked about where you could go to court. We had guys that literally all of their non-commissioned officer training, all their special force, everything was correspondence.
Oh my God! So it's a work from home, but for the Army.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Basically.
Pre-digital work from home.
And those guys were now getting ranked and being team sergeants and
shit.
stuff. And I just couldn't handle. Coming from the Ranger Regiment, I was wound up way too tight, especially for like special forces and now reserve special forces. I was wound way too tight for it. I just couldn't do it, and I left. And plus, I got injured, and I took they called it individual mobilization augmentee job. So you're a reservist assigned to an active unit. And so I was assigned to the JFK Special Warfare Center to the anti-terrorism attachment for the mid to late 90s. And that was a really fun class. It was a Department of Defense class, service members going to high-risk postings, mostly embassy postings. Guys would be working in plain clothes overseas. They could bring their family members, teach them all the terrorist MO, which was really interesting to learn. You know, computers were pretty new. It's like 1996-ish or so. So, you know, you really don't have as good databases. Mostly you have a lot of oral history and a lot of notes. But these guys had compiled, you know, everything to do with terrorist attacks, kidnappings, bombings, etc. And we would try to, you know, teach people what to look for. They'd have rental cars for their week. And of course, we'd put fake bombs on them that they'd have to find, right? They have to do car bomb searches. They did a little concealed carry day. They did a driving day, which was really fun. Performance driving, smashing cars. Everybody got to do ramming cars and stuff. So it's just a 5-day course, but it was just jam-packed full of really practical information. So that was my reserve job for a while. But the injury I had sustained in 12th Group got bad enough. I just went inactive for a while. And then September 11th happened, and I couldn't be inactive now, right? It's game day. It's time to suit up. It took me about 2 years. I had Insights going that whole time. So I started Insights in 1990.
Was your side gig in 1990?
Yeah, started in 1990. I still worked jobs like at night and stuff like that. I'd have weekends off. I'd teach on the weekends. And but I was building up. I built it up to be kind of a full-time, not a very good full-time job, but a full-time job. And now the war exists, and I'm like, well, I need to go to war, right? Mm-hmm. And so I made, you know, the worst financial decision I've ever made, which was to go to war, versus like turn Insights into some company to support GWAT.
Oh yeah, because I remember when I was getting into guns in that like the 2000s time frame.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to training events and just running into like Uncle Billy Bob's tactical training courses, and like, oh yeah, we just had like a whole unit come through, like we're just raking in money hand over fist, and it's just like some fat guy and fucking wife beater. And like the dumbest AR I've ever seen, the most fucked AR, you know, the whole Tapco catalog. I was like, this guy's raking in contracts.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Some of the guys getting contracts in various places, they knew how to get contracts. They didn't know anything else. In fact, they would send people to people like us to learn how to do things, to then go back. Yeah, but I really wanted to go. And it took me about 2 years to kind of reorganize Insights so I could leave. And it also took me about 2 years to get physically ready to go back in, I thought. And I rejoined 19 Special Forces Group. I had a bunch of buddies there from 12th Group and from other places. And I was like, okay. And they're like, no, it's not like it was. It's way cooler, way better guys. And so I went back and quickly found out that I wasn't in good enough shape nearly immediately while training up to go to Afghanistan.
You weren't 25 anymore.
No, and you know, even at 40, I was not the in shape 40-year-old I needed to be, right? It just wasn't there. So, but luckily, Special Forces, Special Forces had always done it, but especially courtesy of Donald Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld identified that Special Forces would be the ultimate on-the-ground intelligence collectors, right? That they should be doing the low-level source stuff. And Special Forces has a program, an entry-level, low-level source program, right? So running HUMIT. And I went to that program, and there was all civilian clothes. You know, I'm walking around like with a computer bag over my shoulder and a Starbucks coffee and a suit. And I'm like, oh, this is what I should be doing, and talking to people. And I've been talking for a living now for years, right? So, and the instructors for that class, the first class I went to, were active duty instructors. And they were not exactly excited about teaching National Guard and kind of looked down on us. But about 2 or 3 weeks into the class, they actually admitted that we were doing better than active duty classes because we had civilian lives and civilian careers and relationships, and we're older. We could talk to people, right? And so I kind of knew it. I had it figured out when like I literally was in the same Starbucks as one of my instructors and they didn't recognize me as being one of the students in the class. I felt like, okay, now I've found my niche. I need to be moving this direction. I need to not be carrying 70 pounds of gear across uneven terrain at night. You know, that's just not going to work for me anymore. So I got really, really lucky and did that course. And then almost immediately, what would happen with 19th Group is we would suddenly get a slot to go to a class, and you know, people have to react quickly to go to a class, and most people have normal jobs. They can't just leave immediately. A normal unit, active duty unit, if they said, hey, Monday you got to go to this, you're like, okay, I'm you know. But as a civilian, they're like, hey, who can go to this who can leave in 3 days to England for 2 months? Well, nobody can do that, right? Well, I'd be like, you know, I'd raise my hand, and I always prefaced it with, don't send me if someone else wants to go, but if we're going to waste the slot, send me, right? If nobody else is going to go, send me. And I got lucky, and I went to class in Hereford, United Kingdom, for close target reconnaissance, so which is surveillance and covertly entering places and stuff. I went and did that. I came back and immediately got an opportunity to go to a technical surveillance class. And then ended up running as a program manager in Southern Iraq for technical surveillance for 3 years. That's kind of my transition away from all the shooting guns, blowing stuff up, you know, jumping out of airplanes, to plainclothes work.
Yeah, interesting. And then after 3 years of that, were you just back into Insights?
Yes. So I rode Iraq out till the very end. So 2012, and came home and rededicated myself to Insights.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the full story, because you know, I've heard like bits and pieces before. Like I didn't know you were a Ranger, right? I always assumed you were just SF only. And then Richard Mason, and when I went to Darcy in 2020, it's like, oh yeah, I know Greg. Like,
Yep.
We were like in SF at the same time, stuff like that. And he was the one who brought up the fact that you had trained with John Shaw, because I was impressed that he had trained with John Shaw. And it's like, yeah, it's a lot smaller circle than people realize.
Absolutely. I went and taught for a little while at Darcy. I taught some pistol work there during a contract they had. They brought me in.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the evolution of companies and stuff, because you know what I know about Darcy now is all their like survival training and SWAT training, occasionally military training. Talking to people during GWAT, it was like the place to go for military people who want to deploy.
Yeah, definitely. For evolving your CQB skills into the real world, I think they have done a fabulous job, right? So it's not just live fire shoot houses. You can only learn so much with paper targets, right? You've got to do other things. It has to be more chaos, right? Now you have to be ready for that chaos, right? You can't just jump right into the chaotic environment. But they really were a big deal for quite a while.
Stress testing via insane force on force people. People who for fun do force on force training. Speaking of which, that gal right there, she's a Red Cell IT girl who does survival training and force on force for fun. Like, a real Southern woman, you know. I think she was a champion motorcycle racer before injury put her into like, I gotta do other stuff instead. So now for fun, she suits up and shoots SWAT people and really tests their skills. And whatnot.
Now you went to Darcy. How'd that all happen?
Basically, some customers of mine who were high-speed dudes were like, oh yeah, you should go, man, it's super awesome. So they put in a good word for me, and you know, I reached out. Like, yeah, sure, we'll have you, because usually they have like 1 or 2 industry people. It was interesting because I took the same class twice, because the first time we went, our mutual David K, you know, the first time I was there was little Chang, medium Chang, and big Chang, and I was medium Chang.
Okay.
And I'm 6'2", you know, 185. So David's big Chang, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But it was very interesting because I really sucked the first time. Like some of the cops are there were like not amused that I was there learning how to do CQB the hard way.
Right.
The very first day, very first exercise. You know, they're all right, make entry. Show me how you make entry. And I was like, and the guy's like, stop. What do you do for a living? And I was like, I wanted to be like, I sell sexy art calendars.
Yeah, right.
But he could tell that I wasn't a SWAT guy.
Sure,
Because I'd
sure.
never done entry as
Mhm.
like a thing before.
Right.
And I had to learn very quickly. So maybe by day 3, I had stopped sucking. But yeah,
No, you probably didn't. You probably sucked all the way to the end.
yeah.
Just didn't suck as bad as you started sucking, right?
Yeah, I wasn't a huge liability by the
Yeah.
end. But what was it? They was like, the way you learn basketball is you actually dribble the basketball and you don't just read about it in books, right?
No, yeah.
So by the time I did the second class, you know, I was like a superstar because I already know what all the surprises were and all the challenges were going to be.
Sure.
And also the second class, they were a lot more pleasant. They were hilarious. It was like the first class, you know, they were just regular old cops. The second class, they were all cops with personalities.
Mhm.
Like there was a Louisiana cop. There was a cop who was like a big bodybuilder type, and he was kind of like Grok the Destroyer or whatever from
Mhm.
Guardians of the Galaxy. And they had a female cop who was like one of the boys, you know. She had a big swinging dick like everybody else, even though she was like an attractive young woman.
Mhm.
Like it was just so much funner going through the second time, being practiced and being with a more relaxed and funny crowd.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it was fun going to Darcy for sure. For me, the value add was now I know there's a huge difference between competitive shooting, civilian shooting,
Mhm.
and doing it as a job. Because like when you're shooting as a civilian, it's kind of you're only racing against yourself, racing against the clock. Whereas like when you're doing this professionally, it's a team sport. So it's like I definitely think people with like team sport backgrounds, you can train them how to be useful with a gun.
Mhm.
Whereas like training a person who's just got purely gun background and making him into like a tactical shooter, I think is a little bit more difficult.
You see it all the time where people master a skill like shooting, and then they compare themselves to like special operators, and they're like, "Well, I'm better than them, so therefore somehow I'm better than them at their whole job,"
Yeah.
which you're only seeing
1% of the job.
Yeah, and shooting is
5%.
just not that important. Like honestly, if you have a bunch of high C class, B class shooters as entry dudes, you're killing it, right? I'd much rather have a bunch of B class shooters that know how to work together.
Yeah, it can
Right.
move together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like one of those things that you don't know or you don't believe until you experience it. Because, you know, I was that guy, I was like, I've been to 10 years of shooting classes. I'm a killer, baby. And then, you know, I go to Darcy, he's like, oh, I fucking suck. I don't have ability. So I don't know how to move with them, you know? It's
Sure.
like, oh, I see a bad guy. I just take the shot.
Right.
But, like, you know, what if your buddy's like right there?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a danger. You could have killed someone, you know?
Yep.
Like, that was one thing I was counseled on. It's like, you have to earn the shot. You have to be in the right position.
Yep.
The right time. You can't just be like, there's a bad guy, I need to
Right.
blast his ass. Like on a flat range, the 180 rule, yeah, everyone's safe, do whatever. But
Mhm.
it's like, you know, it's a 360 range
Yep.
in a tactical situation. So you have to be really aware of yourself, where everyone else is, and you have to be able to gel well and move well, place yourself correctly. And you have to do your job. So my job was not to blast that guy at that moment
Correct.
in time.
You had a job.
But, you know,
Yep.
that instinct was trained incorrectly in me because you know in a video game and like competition shooting it teaches you like fucking go for it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
gas on the pedal. But it's like yeah, with a real life scenario, doing it for a job is completely different. If you're stuck on the perimeter looking out a window for half an hour, that's your job.
That's your job, man.
You're gonna have to look out somebody's gonna have to look out the window. Somebody's gonna have to watch the back the whole time, you know.
I had a buddy get the boot from Triple Canopy Selection early years, so that was like 2005, because he shot through the formation. You know, so you have a diamond, and he's like saw a target, and I'm like, dude, you had a job. Your job was to watch your sector. You just like not only did you shoot through the formation, which is dangerous for everybody, that also means you weren't doing your job.
Yeah.
Right? That's just unacceptable, you know. So you have to do your job. Yeah, that takes a lot of discipline, and that comes through training, of course.
So yeah, that's definitely very useful for me. But let's transition it back to teaching.
Okay.
Because this has been your main profession for the better part of 4 decades.
Almost 3.5. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've taught all different levels of shooters, from total novices up to What was like the highest level?
Grandmasters. Yeah. Dave Vaughn, in the late 90s, he was a grandmaster, and he came to classes. Even though he's a much better shooter than me, he had been doing a couple years of executive protection work and been teaching and not competing. And he went from being about in the top 20 guys in the country to being like in the top 200 guys in the country over a 2-year, 3-year period. Because one, he wasn't shooting as much, and two, the art was evolving. That we talked about how like the late 80s, early 90s, the best guys figured it out. That doesn't mean it trickled down to everybody yet, right? It's still trickling down. So by the late 90s, the art is still advancing as far as in the general populace of shooters. And so people were moving ahead. So he was sitting still or losing ground while other people are moving ahead, right? So he's like, well, whatever I'm doing right now isn't working, so I'm going to go ahead and give something else a try. And he came to class, our intensive handgun skills class, and he's a million times better shooter than me. And honestly, he only probably did half of what I told him because he could cut corners and cheat, you know, and I'm trying to do, you know, real foundational stuff. But he did call me up about 2 months later to thank me because he shoots at the same home range that Rob Latham and Brian Enos used to shoot out in I think it's in Scottsdale. He said they were doing a competition, and Brian Enos told him it was the best he'd seen him shoot in years.
Okay.
So, and I said, well, what did you do? And he goes, I just did what you told me to do.
Which was
foundational stuff, right? Basics, you know, working your trigger with foundations, you know, working on the basics, which once again, Dave, he was cutting a lot of corners because he didn't have to go all the way back to the beginning like I wanted him to go. But even doing half of what I was saying and working your dot drills, like one, can you shoot a group? Okay, if you can shoot a group, can you shoot the same target multiple times, right? You know, can you shoot multiple targets? Can you do that? Can you work from the ready position? Can you work from the holster? And you build towards those things. But you go back and you work on your foundation all the time. Like if you can't hit exactly what you want to hit, you need to master that, right? There's no reason to try to shoot fast if you aren't hitting. Now, there is a reason in training to miss sometimes. I'm not saying that, but accuracy has to be one of the foundational things, right? And so you go back to the beginning, go back to trigger discipline, go back to how you reset your trigger, you know, how you prep your trigger, all these things. Now he's shooting a competitive gun, which is a bit different, right? The triggers are so light that they can do a few things that we can't do with our street triggers.
Yeah, like was the mechanical limit of a stock Glock split times wise?
I'd say the mechanical limit of most of your semi-automatic pistols is about 600 rounds per minute, which is 10 rounds a second.
Was that in like fractions of like point?
That's 0.1s. That's 0.1 splits. Yeah. Now I've never shot 0.1 splits. You'll see on a Glock. I'm about a 6-round second shooter, so I can run 0.15s pretty well if I'm training. If I'm walking up and just basically cold or at a class demonstrating, you know, I'm 0.25s, 0.2s. But if I push, I've done, you know, 18 rounds out of a Glock 17 in 3 seconds exactly, right? That's not lighting the world on fire. But it's a solid performance, right? It's nothing like a Grandmaster would do. Grandmasters are limited by the mechanical, you know, efficiency of the gun, right? They're topped out at basically 10 rounds a second, right? The guns won't shoot faster. I think Brian Enos in the late 90s said he had a gun that shot 11 rounds a second, but it didn't even last half a season before it self-destructed. Yeah, because
there's not enough mass.
Basically. And yeah, and it was unlocking too fast, and then all that wear goes into the actual components that are unlocking, right? As opposed to, you know, being there firmly when it locks. And but yeah, the guns were held back by the guns. The human interface with the machine has been figured out, right? Guns are figured out. The how to shoot's figured out. And I don't think personally people ask me, well, when's the next evolution going to happen? Because there has been no evolution in 20-something years. All we've done is like improve the reliability of the guns, improve the reliability of cartridges, the reliability of the optics. Like everything's better than it was. Nothing's different than it was. And I don't think there's going to be an evolution in shooting technique until we see a complete evolution in technology of the gun, right? And who knows what that'll be? We have no idea, right?
Can't even imagine.
No, like what's it gonna? Yeah, we don't know. And but as of right now, we're topped out. And so really, if you're gonna master guns, if you're gonna buy a gun, master guns, it's figured out. All you got to do is like put yourself in the program. You know what I mean? That's really all you're going to do. Submit to the program and you will become good. Right?
Oh, now we get to the good part. You have a new program now.
Yes.
That's scalable. Basically, instead of a paper tab at home, this will become a gunfighter at home.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your curriculum like? What is your digital curriculum?
So we took our first level defensive class called General Defensive Handgun, which is not just a shooting class. It does include self-defense material. So we talk about mindset, about awareness, what we call the priorities of survival, the legal aspects. So it's got all that too, but it is all the basics of shooting, no different than you would learn in military special operations, etc. Except we do things a little differently than a CQB unit because we're not CQB guys, right? We're lone operators. So we're plain clothes by ourselves. We don't do things quite exactly the same, but we've taken our general defensive handgun curriculum and put that online. And so what we've done is we have all the lectures that you would have in class plus more. And then we've taken all the shooting drills and broken them all down and set them up. So you have like, here's your 12 dry fire sessions. Here's your 20 something live fire sessions. And here's exactly what you're going to try to achieve during this session, right? And then here is a bunch of students doing that session. Here's the mistakes. Here's the corrections, right? And you're seeing it from all angles with all different people with all different guns. And then you can do that. You can diagnose yourself. Of course, you can use your own camera phone and things like that. And you can also submit that to the forums for critique.
Oh, okay, right? So live personal video. All right, I'll take a look for you. It reminds me of a lifting forum. So
yes.
It's like, has my form deviated? Because I know this happened to me where like a 95% perfect lift is not good enough. That 5% deviation is enough to cause injury. So a bunch of strength people are like, yeah, you should record yourself every month, every quarter, just to see if you had any deviation, and they'll critique each other. So that makes sense for guns too, because guns is a very shooting is a very perishable skill. So if you have that ability to record yourself and get valid critique, not from trolls, by the way.
No, from other people that are in the same class learning the same material. So that is important, right? You have to be on the same sheet of music, because if somebody is coming at it, if you're going to the range with your buddy and his training is YouTube and Instagram and yours is a class, well, you're going to have constant conflict between the two of you, because he's going to be like, well, what if this and what if that? And he's got all this theoretical knowledge. Well, and you're trying to work a program, right? Yeah. That's completely different. Like work a program. And just like Mark Ripetoe's Starting Strength forum, I think he's got a great forum if anybody ever needs critiquing on their core lifts. That's the kind of place. You submit a video, and then a bunch of guys that actually know what they're talking about are like, hey, look where your elbow is. If you moved it right here, and if you did this before that, and then you try it, right? And you see if it works. You submit a new video, and they're like, exactly correct, right? And you will know, of course, in lifting, because it's objective. You pushed the weight or you didn't, right? Shooting is objective. You have accuracy and speed standards, right? And so, that's what we're giving you in class is, here are your accuracy standards, here are your speed standards for each level. They have to be appropriate for where you're at. You're not starting with Grandmaster standards, right? You may never get there, probably will never get there. So we have to have appropriate standards and appropriate curriculum design for real people that are normal people that learn at a normal rate, that learn normal ways, right? And when I say normal, I mean, you're not taking some Delta Force guy that's been through X amount of special operations training, got selected. You're going to train him differently than you train the average person. The good thing about online is you can hit it from all the angles, all the learning theory angles, right? If you're a visual person, if you're an auditory person, right, you get everything yourself. Plus, you're going to be tactilely doing things and feeling things, looking at yourself on video, trying different things, trying a different feel with your thumbs and with your grip. And you'll know from your performance standards whether it's working or not, right? That's the great thing about shooting. Proof's in the pudding. Like, put it on the timer, put it on the paper, let's see. We can't help it. We all want to be individual snowflakes and think that we're special.
Built different.
And we can learn differently, and I can, And the truth is, we just need to follow the program. And are we all a little bit different? Yes. That's where individual coaching, the forums, videoing yourself comes in. I remember that really hit me going back once again to Mark Ripetoe and Starting Strength. He has a DVD that I watched when I was in Iraq that I loved, and it really helped me. And it was him coaching like 12 different people all
Mm.
weekend on the basic lifts. And so you have the great big tall skinny dude, and you've got the, the overweight dude, and you've got the female
girl,
who's
yeah.
5'2", and they're all squatting, they're all deadlifting, they're all benching, and they're all getting critiqued because they all have different bodies.
Yep.
So we are individuals, and there is going to be differences in how you hold a gun and how you stand. The differences are not as big as people think they are, right? Most people just follow the program, right? Do it the way you're told. The program's been designed to get you to the end goal, right? And if you just get, like, with lifting, if you just get on the program and stick with the program and kind of do what you're told, it'll turn out pretty dang good. I don't think there's a faster activity or sport to learn than shooting, because there's no sport that you can get the number of reps, right? If you're going to go to the batting cage, how many times are you actually going to get to bat?
Before your like elbow or shoulder gives out.
Yeah, and there's all the reset time. And if you're going to throw, it's even worse. Like, you got to go recover especially football. What are you going to do? You can't have like 100 footballs. The average person isn't going to.
Yeah.
They're going to have somebody throw it back to them, or they're going to have a couple balls. And there's only so many reps you can do. With shooting, you can just go, go, go. And the other great thing about shooting is, unlike a lot of sports we do, like if you're a skier or a mountain biker or motorcycle racer, like when you exceed your limitations, that's painful, right? If you exceed your
hospital bill.
yes, it's very painful. There's consequences to be paid. When you exceed your limitations shooting, another round goes in the berm, right? I mean, okay, so I shot my gun too fast. Okay, I missed. Big deal. I can learn so fast because I can push all the way up to the edge all the time. I don't have to have a safety margin, really. Now, obviously, we have to have a safety. We don't want to shoot the floor. We don't want to shoot our leg. But I'm talking about like on the target. There's very little penalty to be paid to doing it wrong, doing it too fast. You can learn how fast you can go by going too fast. Right. So yeah, shooting is the absolute fastest thing to learn, in my opinion, because of the reps and because of the feedback loop.
And also, it's fun. It's rewarding.
It should be. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So basically, this class, when did you film it? Like, how long did it take?
It took a long time. We probably spent a good 9 months on the first class. And now we know how to film stuff, and we're putting together more curriculum quicker. But teaching in front of a camera and teaching live, that's a different experience. So it was very different.
Performance versus interaction.
Yeah. So you don't have that. Like, I really use the audience's like energy. Like sitting here with you, I can speak way easier than
forever.
If I was just talking on a camera. It'd be kind of wooden. So that took a while for me to learn. It took a while to figure out like how we were going to organize things. What did we need to tell people? What angles did they need to see things from? And so it definitely took a long time to film the first one. But there is, we have a lot of material. It's almost 20 hours of material. It's more than if you came to the live class.
Because the live class, you have practical limitations. Whereas on the digital archive, I guess you can just keep going for as long as you need. But you still need to make it concise, right?
Yes. So there's the concise stuff, and then there's kind of like the add-ons, right? Like, here's how to do it. Here's the range session. Here's how to do it. Here's the dry fire session you should do. Here's the live fire session you should do. Okay, here's a bunch of people doing it that we're going to coach. Here's more explanation. It starts to get more extra credit-ish as you move towards the end. Does that make sense? Like, you can stick with, here's how to do it. Do this dry fire session. If you successfully complete this dry fire session, go to this live fire session, right? And that's laid out pretty concise. But then you get all this extra stuff. And I've even linked to video, old school videos from Jeff Cooper and stuff like that, where like, here, if you want some extra credit on, where this color codes thing came from for awareness, go watch this video.
Condition white, condition yellow.
All that. I love that stuff. I think it's very important for a self-defense mindset to have an organization to how you think about life and how do you think about threat levels. And I'm going to explain it one way, but why wouldn't I give you the source material? Like, here's the guy that made it up. If you want to understand this subject more, watch this. And so we've linked to some other videos also. So not only do we have a massive amount of information in our video, we have follow-on stuff if you really want to dive deeper. And if you're an instructor, you would want all that background information too, because for a long time, I'd say almost 10% of the people coming to our classes were instructors, especially law enforcement firearms instructors.
That makes sense, because I took your general defensive handgun even after I'd taken a bunch of other classes, and yeah, it was still very. I learned a lot. Basically, it was nice to. But that's the beauty about guns. Reviewing the basics and fundamentals is always fun. It's always great, and you definitely had a lot of value add for me in terms of the tactical stuff, mindset stuff beyond just the fun shooting stuff. It's
Sure.
like the more practical, tactical. I mean, it's such an annoying, terrible buzzword, but
Right.
the actual like knowing like how to like predict threats, how to keep yourself safe. The stuff that isn't just pulling the trigger, which
Yes.
honestly is more useful in day-to-day life.
Absolutely, because you're not going to pull the trigger probably, right?
Yeah,
You're going to do everything
exactly.
else. You're hoping you're not going to pull the trigger, but of course we need to teach you how to pull the trigger. So that is the main part of the class, and people come to learn to shoot and end up walking away with a lot more information than they thought they were going to get. That is more important than just shooting. And once again, we had a lot of, we used to have, I haven't had as much lately. I think we kind of, in this area, in the Seattle area, I think we seeded the area pretty good. Plus more people now know how to shoot, but I'd consistently get law enforcement firearms instructors every month in class. And usually they were there because one of their officers who was not a good shooter came to our classes, came back and suddenly was a decent shooter. And they're like, how did this guy do that? Right.
Yeah.
And they want to come see how we do it. Academy instructors we have a lot of academy instructors because people failing the academy will come on a weekend to our class, go back and suddenly are not failing. Right. So they want to see how we pulled that off. So, yeah, there's a lot of value in general defensive handgun, even for instructor level people, even for people that can already shoot well, or maybe super well. How do you translate all that to self-defense? You know, how do we want to handle our gun in a self-defense situation? Because what we talked about is not only is the class scalable to a larger audience, we want to teach techniques that are scalable. So when you learn to draw your gun, I want that same draw stroke to work when you're being opposed, right? In a close quarter confrontation, someone's fighting you, right? Trying to keep you from drawing your gun. I don't want you to have a different draw stroke. I want you to be able to use the same draw stroke we taught you with, of course, some modifications for defending yourself. And I want that to scale all the way up to the day you're seatbelted in your car, you haven't trained in 10 years, suddenly there's an extreme situation. I want your draw stroke to work then. I want everything to scale all the way up to the highest performance. So
yeah, speaking of close quarters stuff, you happen to know the ShivWorks guy or something?
Oh yeah, Craig. Yeah. So we actually only met this year for the first time, but he was in 3rd Ranger Battalion 2 years after me.
Oh, he was a Ranger too?
Yeah. Same exact unit. So he was in 3rd Ranger Battalion about 2 years after me. And we started knowing of each other in the late 90s from the National Tactical Invitational. So I was going to the NTI all the time. He wasn't, but a bunch of his buddies were going to the NTI. And so we started interacting a lot. And some of the guys that were taking classes from him were taking classes from me. And some of the guys that were working with him and coaching with him were taking classes from me. So there was definitely like some stuff going on. Now, he completely independently, invented his system while we were doing ours, but we were both trying to solve the exact same problem back in the 90s. How do we use our handgun and do combatives, and how do we integrate this? Because what was going on before was really primitive and really bad.
Yeah.
It was obvious that it was gun guys that didn't know a damn thing about fighting, or it was fighting guys that didn't know a damn thing about guns coming up with answers. And the answers sucked. The answers were really bad. And it was really interesting because Craig and I came up with almost the exact same techniques. I remember getting a DVD of his probably about 2000.
Wait, ShivWorks made a DVD?
Yeah, way back in the day.
I only know him for his fighting and shooting reels on Instagram.
Well, and that's what he always started with is the close quarters confrontation. He calls it EQC. ECQC, right?
Extreme close
extreme. We only ours is not extreme. Ours is only CQC, right? He does the extreme one. So, but I got his DVD and his language, all of his explanations, very different in that he uses very different words. He was not trained by the gun world. You know what I mean? He wasn't a gun sight guy or anything. And so he's got his own way of communicating all the information, and it's excellent. Right? His programs are top notch. And but we were doing things mechanically at least 90% the same. Yeah. We had come to all the same conclusions, really. So that was really awesome to see that this independent dude that we were both in the same unit, which I just think is bizarre.
Yeah.
Separated by 2,000 miles, really came to the same conclusions on how to solve problems.
That's very interesting that he basically because his stuff is similar to yours, independent, it kind of validates each other's
I think
theories.
so.
Theoretically, there's only one correct way to do this. There's 10% deviation.
Right. Yeah. There's a little bit of deviation that is, you can argue about all kinds of stuff, but mostly you're solving things the same way. We have a different background. His was doing undercover drug buys. And so, he comes from a different background in that how he's going to interact with people in the street. He's much more likely to continue to interact with people, right? Because he wants to do a drug buy, right? I'm more likely to
hey, back off,
make the interaction not happen at all, right? And of course, in training, we have to make the interaction happen because we want to train the worst possible outcome, right? But what we really want to train is how do we never get to the worst possible outcome? We want a lot of training on that. It was about 99 or so, actually, one of our instructors, John Holshin, who he and I kind of came up with the CQC system together. He got a call from Tony Blauer. Do you familiar with Tony Blauer at all?
Yeah,
Spear system.
He's on the podcast circuit a bunch.
Okay. So he was a big deal back then, and he has this system called the Spear system. And we had an article written about us in one of the gun magazines. I don't remember which one. And Tony called John, and John's explanation of what happened was Tony basically wanted to accuse him of stealing his material, right? But he didn't want to just come out and accuse him. So instead, he's quizzing him on, what's your background and how did you come up with this? And what Tony decided by the end of the conversation is that we had completely independently decided things that looked a lot like what he was doing. But we both came at it with similar but different backgrounds. We're trying to solve the same question. Well, there's only certain answers that are going to work, right? Especially once you start pressure testing stuff. And this is what gun people were not doing for people like Tony Blauer and Craig Douglas, is nobody was really pressure testing their stuff. They were shooting paper targets and doing these, hitting it in the face and all these,
bullshit stuff.
Right. And, but they weren't putting on fist suits. They weren't mixing it up. They weren't using simunitions. And so once you start pressure testing your system with real people with contact, man, you find out really quickly that a whole bunch of the stuff we used to do just didn't work at all.
Yeah, I think it was the GWAT was the great freaking crucible stress test. Because I remember hearing stories from unit guys. In the 90s, only LAPD D platoon was they were the premier gunfighting unit, so that's why everyone was wearing black and dressed like ninjas. That's what LAPD was doing. But then once GWAT rolled around, it completely flipped. Now it's a random second lieutenant's gonna get 300 combat missions and get in gunfights on the regular,
right?
Whereas a highly trained Navy SEAL for the 80s, 90s, could have skipped out on missions.
Yep.
You just didn't get lucky. Didn't get his chance to deploy.
And you just didn't have the constant combat, right? You had these bursts of combat, right? You had Grenada taught us some things, Panama taught us a few things. Somalia taught us a bunch. That was a big one. And thank goodness that we had it happen. And, it's very unfortunate for the men that died, but overall, each one of those steps for special operations was really important. And that positioned us to be completely ready for September 11th as far as special operations goes. We already knew our tactics and techniques and equipment, and what really changed during GWAT was the quality of all of it, just upped. And so now, instead of having Joe Blow, who's a gun geek, decide to try to learn metallurgy and try to learn machining and make a scope mount, instead you have dudes that are aerospace engineers. They're I want to participate in the war. I want to be a patriot. I'm going to make this cool ass gadget for my buddy that's in Delta Force. And then of course I'm going to make it for the whole squadron. And then I'm going to make it for everybody. And I think that's what happened during GWAT, as we saw really, really skilled designers, machinists, etc., jump into the game, and now things just work. I came from an era where like getting a flashlight on a gun to work was a big deal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like just having a flashlight that worked was a big deal.
I think it was Knight's Armament talks about that. You saw the Panama footage of like duct tape mag lights. And he's like, what the heck? And so he invented the RAS specifically so you could mount flashlights.
All these systems, Surefire, Surefire 6P when it came out, you're like, oh my God, 60 lumens. It's amazing,
Man, the Scar is my favorite gun just because it's a very specific moment in time. Like it was like a 2004 Rush design.
Yeah.
Deployed in 2008, and then by 2010, it's kind of gone. But it was like it was the early GWAT like idea of what the perfect gun would be, which in 2025, 2026 seems a little ridiculous. But
yeah.
For me, it's that nostalgia.
It was we have higher quality gear. There is no doubt, but we don't have really different. Like we're not. Everything was already figured out. We need a red dot, we need a scope, we need a flashlight, we need a laser. It's just the ones we had kind of sucked, right? Yeah. And so we made all those better. The Germans figured out before World War II. There was like post World War I white papers written on what they needed. And they had already, like by 1930, identified that you needed an intermediate cartridge select fire weapon with a 20 to 30 round magazine that accepted optics and sound suppressors. Yeah. And by the end of the war, they literally had units with night vision gear on their Sturmgewehrs.
Oh, really? That's crazy.
Yes. Now, had an emitter that was this big, and you had a backpack for the battery, but they literally had units with night vision suppressed assault rifles in 1944. Yeah. So we've known what we wanted to accomplish for a long time. When Stoner came out with the M16, we knew that we were going to stick optics on this, suppressors on it. We just didn't know how.
Super interesting seeing how what we now take for granted was learned the hard way like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, we taught a rifle class in the 90s. Like the requirement was have a sling. That was literally it. We had to convince people to put slings on guns back then. And then it was like have a sling and a flashlight. Once the Surefires were really figured out, you have a sling and a flashlight. And people really weren't running many optics in the 90s. They existed. They just weren't very reliable yet, right? We knew what we wanted to accomplish. And like I said, GWAT really like opened the floodgates for money. And as important of the money is the motivation of the different patriots all around the country that wanted to get involved. But, if you're a 50-year-old dude that runs a machine shop, you're not signing up to go to war, but you're like, well, I want to be involved. So let me help somehow. Let me make something that'll help, right? That's like LaRue and those guys. That's really how they got into it, is they had some special operator that knew him from when they were kids, and it's like, hey man, can you make me this thing?
Yeah, I think LaRue's talked about that. Like he was a machine shop guy. He didn't make. I think his first tactical products were resetting steel targets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, then he like slowly worked his way to actually making gun accessories, which was when I learned about him in like the mid 2000s, and now he makes complete guns.
Yeah,
super good stuff like that.
I think a lot of that came from Delta and SEAL Team 6 and stuff, where dudes that had discretionary budgets would just get a hold of people they knew and say, could you make me this thing? I want to try this thing out. And then once it worked, then all the guys in their unit are like, well, can your buddy make me one? Yeah. And then it's like, hey, I got ideas for this other thing. If you got a guy that knows how to make stuff, and all these companies were built that way. And that's really cool.
I think this is why like the cloner market is the way it is. Cause you want to imagine yourself as the guy in 1995 who's got an LPVO, you've got a PEC, you've got night vision, you got binaural night vision in 1994. Like you are an unstoppable killing machine, right? Like now every Marine is basically outfitted like a GWAT era special forces guy. But in the 90s, if you're a Marine, you get like an M16A2 and a flashlight if you're lucky. Like
and a
that works.
Vest, yeah. We were MP5 SDs. I thought that was the coolest gun in the world. I still think it's one of the coolest guns in the world. And that's what I carried in Regimental Recon. But literally back then, like it was mag lights and hose clamps. Literally hose clamps to get a flashlight on the gun. So
yeah, you have to clean it every 300 rounds. I did not know that. Like,
no, I don't know if we ever did that.
Oh my god! Yeah,
but I love that gun. It was such a fun gun to shoot. It's so great. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for talking about your history, your experience, and your new online training course.
Thank you for having me out.
Yeah,
This has been
sure.
awesome. Thanks, man. Hello, my name is Greg Hamilton. I'm going to be your primary instructor for the General Defensive Handgun class. Everyone that owns a gun that's going to use it for self-defense, this is the appropriate level of instruction that they should get. So once again, grip, clear, lock, ready, sight. Gun didn't fire for some reason. Tap, rack, bang. It still didn't fire. Lock, rip, work, tap, rack, bang. We're going to have a system of being aware, and it's going to start with condition white. It's going to go white, yellow, orange, red, and black. That is the justification for use of deadly force, is the conservation of innocent life. You're going to come back, you're going to come down, you're going to grab that concealment with your middle finger lifted out of the way and holster the gun. Like always, when you holster your gun, gently holster your gun to ensure that nothing is in the holster, in the trigger guard, etc. You don't need to shove the gun in the holster. Place it gently in the holster. Come back to the ready position, and now 2-on-1 exercise. The exact same size dimensionally as far as the height of the gun and the length of the gun as the Glock 19. The difference is it's much thinner. Full grip clearance, covered trigger guard, and then lastly, it's rigid and non-collapsible. So after I take the gun out, the holster doesn't collapse and I'm able to put the gun away. No problem at 3.5.